Here's a quick video to show you all the new color swatch features in Photoshop 2021. What if I wanted to use the color palette, the color swatches feature in Photoshop to create a new color swatch palette just for She? That would be something we could do. Now this has changed radically how this works with the new Photoshop 2021. And I don't know if you guys have messed with the new color swatches or not yet.
But it's cray-cray.
They're great, but they're also crazy. And my swatches, as I scroll through them, will look like a mess. And that's mostly because I didn't comprehend or understand the changes they had made. When I first looked at you, just expect it to work like it always does. So in the past, when you would go to add a new swatch, Photoshop would always add the new swatch to the very end of the palette. So like this little pale yellow, it would add it after that. Now, if you are on a swatch, that swatch becomes like the active swatch. And if you add a new swatch,
yes, Skittles for sure.
If you add a new swatch, the swatch gets added just whatever after the active swatch. So if you don't know that, and I don't think anyone did it first because it wasn't even something that like they bragged about or advertised or anything, it can really jumble up your swatches in a hurry. But the other cool thing that we have in Photoshop 2021 is this ability to make swatch groups. Now, it used to be if you wanted to make a special set of swatches, you had to make an entirely new swatch palette just for that project. And you saved your old one out, you made your new one, you saved it out, you would load one, and you would load two, but they would just be on top of each other. There was no distinction between the two. It just all becomes one big mass, right? So now we have the ability to make these little groupings, and they look like little folders in the swatches. And so you can make individual swatch palettes or swatch groups. And so here, because of Patreon, I've made one for the Space Shuttle program, and one for How to Mansion, and one for the 12 Parsecs solo art for Star Wars. And that works really good. That's a really good way to organize your swatches, but at the same time, it's not like the old way where you had to like save them somewhere and remember where that was and go and load them. So, and
unlike the other one too, it's not just one continual stream. It actually makes great sense, and I don't know why they didn't think of it earlier. But
right. And I would say it's not perfect yet.
Well,
it's the first step in a new direction. And someone was asking us on Discord, what about the swatches that live in the Adobe library, and how come they're not the same? And right now, because they're still like, there used to be standalone Photoshop and Creative Cloud Photoshop, and now there's kind of really only Creative Cloud Photoshop, but they haven't merged all those features yet. So you can have color swatches that are in the library, which are in the cloud, and you can have color swatches that are in your Photoshop that lives on your computer, and they're still kind of two separate things, and you can kind of merge and do different things, but it's not, Adobe hasn't made it one unified system yet. So for now, you just have to pay attention to it, which is a little frustrating. So I'm going to make a new group. And so in the swatches palette, I'm going to click the little folder icon to make a new group. And I will name that one She. And I'll click OK. And now that that group's active, hopefully it puts the colors in the right place. So what I can do is I can pick like She's red, and then come over here and click the new swatch icon, and I have the ability to name it, and I can say She red. And you have this thing to add to the current library. I will tell you, a lot of people are saying this isn't really working, so I'm going to leave it unchecked. Seems like some colors are syncing to the library, some are not, so I'm just going to put it just in my swatches palette. And so then underneath in my She group, I now have the red. So I'm going to do that for all the other colors on She.
Now, do I have to name them? Do they have a default name?
So they do have a default name, and we'll do one more, and you can see.
Because isn't it obvious that it's She red if it's in She folder?
That's true. You don't have to name them, and that actually helps when it's in that group. You can be, because like if I go through my other swatches, some of them will be named and it'll be like Superman blue.
Well, and it made sense before because you might not, it's just in a long list, you could find it. But if it's in this little groupy thing,
yeah, you don't have to. But now if you click the new swatch, it'll give you whatever the default name. So for me, it's like swatch 3,998, right?
That's helpful.
Or I can make it like be like She gold or whatever. So, but yeah, you don't have to name them. It will give it a name, but unless you change your the way your palette is displayed, you don't really see that name unless you hover over it. So like if I let my mouse hover over that gold for a minute, it says She gold.
Right.
So.
Well, and I have to tell you, here's a little telling a tale on Brian that
What I do.
Brian can't not name things correctly. He can't not do it. It has to be done right. Like we have this folder system.
I think she's telling herself, not me.
Nuh-uh. Is if we have this folder system, and so if you read our books, if you have our Hi-Fi Color for Comics book, it tells us about how we name our folders in order to keep track of things. And it has to say, if Brian names the folder, it always says RGB PSD. If Christy names the folder, it's like in lowercase or whatever, and it says RGB. We're done. You should know that that's what that is. But Brian's every time has to be all caps, RGB space PSD, all caps has to be every time. You can always tell if Brian's made a folder or if Christy's made a folder. Because his are very precise and named exactly the way that he designed, and I'm just like, whatever, here they go. And line art always has a capital L and a dash and a capital A in art, and I'm just like, line art.
We have a system for a reason, man. Now, one of the other things about she is her eyes. Billy's always had them as like an emerald green for like 20 years, but now he's moving a little bit more towards like a hazel green. So even though this swatch is current, I may end up having to like adjust this when we're all done. We'll have to just see.
She could have new eyes and old eyes.
Things evolve. Yeah, she eyes new. She eyes old.
She eyes final. She eyes final.
But another good reason to name these is that we have like a couple of different shades of whites and grays and things that we're using here. So it might make it easier, to keep track of things long term.
Like face.
Yeah, you're like, oh, is that the white or is that the gray for the hair? Or is that the gray for the costume? And if you name it, it'll make it a little easier. So I think we got most of the main colors there. So that's one way.
The inside of her.
I usually just make that up as I go. So yeah, but since I did it there, I'll probably do it on the new one too. Because you don't always see that. It's not a consistent thing. So that's sort of how the new palette works. Now, what if you want to save these out for some other reason? Now, in the old versions of Photoshop, if you went to export your palettes, you just had like export swatches, right? And you could only export the entire swatch palette. So now, it'd be nice if they just had like export group. It does seem like they're not quite there yet. I've tried it a few times and it seems to be hit or miss. If you have a group selected and you export, it doesn't always give you the whole group. But what they do have is export selected. And so unlike past times, you can actually hold the shift key down and select all those palette swatches that we just made. And then you could go and say export selected swatches. And then that will, hopefully, if it doesn't crash, it'll give you, it's like spinning.
It doesn't like Discord.
When we're Discord and recording, it's really hard on it. Okay, there you go. It would give you the option to export that. And so if we wanted to do that, we could name these, she swatches or whatever, and export that out. And then it would be available to import into another version of Photoshop or some other computer, or to share with somebody. If you were working on a project with multiple people, you could export those swatches, share it with those other people, and everyone would be using the same color. So it could be really handy.
That would be handy.
Comic books or not, right? So it's a great new feature. Again, because it's so new, it maybe doesn't work the way we expect it to related to the old version of swatches, but it has a lot of power and it's very useful. And hopefully, as these features grow and become a little more stable and integrated, we'll get used to it and it'll be something we can rely on. But there's a lot of power there, but like a lot of things in Photoshop, we have to just dig deep and find out how to use it best.
It is cool, you're right. And it's finally, more usable than just 50 gazillion swatches in a row that you gotta remember. Is this one, Supergirl or Batgirl? Is this,
And like, I kind of know in my mind where some of my swatches lived, and now they're all jumbled up. And so it's a challenge for me. And so I mean.
He was in here mumbling under his breath about Booster Gold colors the other day, so.
Yeah, I was like, will I take the time to reorganize all my old swatches?
Doubtful.
I don't know that I'll do that.
Did you mention that it was 3,998 or whatever that you had? So I doubt it.
But, can I be more useful in how I arrange my swatches moving forward? Certainly. And that's probably, will be the best practice is to do that. Thanks for watching our video on color swatches. Stay on target and we'll see you next time.